Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. Still in palindrome. The 10-day period of palindrome. It's like some sort of biblical prophecy or something. But no, it's just an odd coincidence, and but coming to an end fairly soon, as May comes to an end. We are back. It is Wednesday, and it's a Wednesday that feels like a Tuesday, one of those Monday off things, which means that it's Greg Dworkin's first crack at the news of the week. So we look forward to that. It's going to be exciting and new. We'll see whether, in part of his lineup, whether we can finally put the craziness of the Trump speeches behind us or not. There's always something, and we'll always have callbacks to something, and we'll be reminded of some of the weirder, dumber moments of all of that stuff. But, you know, life marches on, and the rest of us should too, I guess, if he'll allow it. All right, well, not Greg. Greg will allow it. Greg will celebrate it. He's got his stories lined up and coming through in our Zoom group chat, team chat. Now, all right, we're getting used to the new tools. Everything seems to be working as expected at this point. And all right, so gathering up the news from around the country, and I don't know if I see one major theme emerging from social media this morning, although right before airtime, we found out that 2 Jersey Shore beaches are under fecal bacteria advisories. Not such an unusual thing, except for the fact that we now have a Secretary of Health and Human Services who might very well go swimming there because it has a fecal bacteria advisory. I'm not certain what it is that drives him to do that. I don't know whether he doesn't believe in... I know it is said he's not a believer in germ theory, but that doesn't mean you have to go swimming in germs. I don't know. But I guess if he's really intent on proving his point about germ theory, I guess I encourage it. It's got to catch up with him some point. I mean, I don't know if he should look different at his age than he does, but it doesn't. I don't know. To me, he's not looking like a healthy guy. He's weirdly grizzled, and that probably has something to do with it. But he actually loves to do that. He went. That stems from a story of his swimming in a creek, I think, like in Washington D.C. Did he go in Rock Creek where there was a bacteria warning sign posted, and he made a point of being photographed swimming right beneath the sign and taking the kids to swim there too. I don't know why the Department of Family Services didn't come and do something about that, but at any rate, he can certainly link up with President Trump's favorite tagline for his social media posts and thank everybody for their attention to this fecal matter, which is floating offshore and New Jersey. You know, there's a lot of New Jersey jokes to be made there, I guess. I don't appreciate any of them myself, but this is that season, and also, of course, the season when people want to be going to the beach. But the weather is crappy, so I don't know. Well, so's the water, as it turns out. So I guess it all matches. All right, well, a lousy day here today in Virginia, and the long stretch of cool and rainy days for which I will surely be grateful under any other circumstances. Normally we go directly to summer here in Virginia, and we complain about that we haven't had a spring. And now we're having a spring, and it's kind of annoying, and I wish it would get sunnier and warmer, but it's a nice break for the temperature. We'll check in on temps in Connecticut. How about we do that now? Oh, and I've, of course, naturally...
Not before the fanfare.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then I realized, I didn't set up the fanfare. There's all my good stuff is, I don't know, it's elsewhere. Still getting used to this part of the system. Also,
well, you know the whole part about after a 3-day weekend, Tuesday feels like Monday.
Right.
But in summer, Wednesday feels like Monday. So this is like Monday morning.
Maybe this feels like Tuesday, and that's why I didn't have a fanfare ready. All right, so let's see. If I go, we'll go more or less at random here. Ooh, why not this? A grand entrance. Although you usually go for the other things.
Play it and we'll see why not.
All right. Okay. Grand entrance brass fanfare. How about this? Short.
How about this?
It's very grand.
I didn't hear anything.
You didn't hear anything? Okay, well, that's not so good. We'll
That's
figure out why that's happening. Okay, yeah, right,
That's
okay.
grand. That's just grand.
All right, well, I will poke the system in various places and see why it didn't hear anything. And then
Monday morning.
Yeah, I guess that's really it. Huh. Oh, okay, the Firefox application box is red, which I think means I'm still asleep, and I don't know why.
Well, I am, definitely.
Yeah, okay. Well, that gives us an opportunity to pick a different one, and only the podcast listeners will hear it. Well, how about we head in the military direction?
My Zoom workplace just popped up with a pro tip and said you could use a bigger room. I wonder if that means we're really getting along this morning.
I guess. What does this mean? All right, well.
Purchase a large meetings add-on and make sure nobody gets left out.
Oh.
Here we go. Drum roll.
Yeah, not so much fanfare as military drums, which actually it sounds like we're going to execute you, which is not what I was looking for. But it's included under fanfares. So some of them are for celebrating winners and some of them are for executing traitors.
Yes. Well, this professional show is professionally executed this morning.
Yeah. There's 22 other hours I could be trying fanfares.
Right. So let's talk some news.
All right. Let's just jump right into it.
Okay. Today's pundit roundup should be a bit reassuring to people, I hope.
All right.
The title is "It's Not You That's Nuts, It's the White House."
It's not you, it's me.
As you mentioned in the introduction, Trump had some blatantly all over the place, bonkers, dipsy doodle speeches like the one he did at the U.S. Military Academy.
Oh, yes.
Where he talked about Al Capone and trophy wives and nothing of import and nothing of consequence.
Yeah, you'd think he was talking to Boy Scouts.
And then didn't stay around to shake people's hands for the graduation, which is typically what presidents do. We know he's an asshole, and we know he's a loser. But the point is, he was really incoherent in the speech.
Yeah.
And let me just give you a couple of examples of that.
Okay, good.
The New York Times.
Glad you're interested. Yes.
Trump gives commencement address at West Point, stressing a new era. The Independent, same speech.
Yeah.
Same words. Trump gives rambling speech about trophy wives, golf, and the great late Al Capone and politically charged West Point address.
Okay.
If you want to know how the New York Times is failing, this is just a perfect example. George Conway notes it and says, "We make jokes about this sometimes because it's laughable, but when journalists try to make sense of the nonsensical, rational out the irrational, and coherence out of the incoherence, they affirmatively do the public interest great harm." Norm Ornstein says, normalizing the abnormal, sadly normal for so much of the mainstream press. The New York Times has done some terrific reporting with great op-eds, but this framing, all too typical, is deeply dangerous. Imagine if Biden had given this kind of speech, how they would have handled it.
Sure.
Esvidante in the Huffington Post, and this is all from the Pundit Roundup.
Yep.
Yes, there was a media scandal in 2024, and no, it wasn't about Joe Biden.
Oh, boy, they're trying so hard still. Yeah, okay.
The political press started normalizing Trump weeks after 2021 to get access. That's a big reason Trump later won, not some cover-up of Biden's age. See, the thing is, you can't claim that it's a cover-up of Biden's age because everybody in the country knew he was old. The polls all said the public thinks he's too old. Guess what? He's old. Oh, revelation. He's old.
Yeah, I mean, right. What a great cover-up. The Democrats did an unprecedented change in the lineup for the presidential nomination right in the middle of, in fact, at the end of the campaign season. And, nobody noticed because of what a great cover-up it was. Isn't that something?
Right. So Jake Tapper.
Just give him the book money and maybe he'll stop.
And the other guy from Axios are hawking their book, and I don't really care how well it's selling. I'll tell you this, CNN's ratings are just tanking. Nobody wants to watch them keep hawking the same stupid book.
It is kind of outrageous and
but,
weirdly
Andy
boring.
Borowitz had a good take on this.
Oh, okay.
Tying it all together.
We'll see.
Man feared to be cognitively slipping after writing book about the wrong president.
Yeah,
A man's decision to spend months writing a book
Okay.
about the wrong president is a worrisome sign of cognitive slippage, brain health experts warned on Tuesday. Devoting a 352-page book to unmasking a president who's no longer in office instead of the one currently sowing global chaos indicates serious mental impairment. Making matters worse, an inner circle of the man's co-workers have been enthusiastically touting his book on television in a coordinated effort to conceal his cognitive decline.
That's a plausible explanation for it, right? It's one of those things that you get a knock on the head. The stereotypical question, they ask you the date and who's the president.
Yeah.
I got the
Time,
wrong
date,
guy.
and who's the president, right? So
Yeah.
all of that. In real news,
yes,
I think it's important to keep this in mind as well. Trump loses another battle in his war against elite law firms, says the New York Times. A judge, this is last night, a judge struck down an executive order targeting Wilmer Hale in the latest victory for the handful of firms that have fought back against a Trump administration crackdown. In other words, they keep winning in court. And the Wall Street Journal adds an important nugget. Trump order against Robert Mueller's former law firm, Wilmer Hale, is struck down. A third judge declares the president's targeting of elite law firms unconstitutional. So the courts are doing their job. We win most of the battles in court. We lose a few, but win most. Even the ones we lose, sometimes I could step back and say, okay, I could see why they would do that. Sometimes you have a reasonable discussion and argument about who's really in a position to bring the lawsuit in the first place.
yes,
Legal term for that, I forget, but whatever.
standing.
There you go. Who has standing to do this?
Okay.
And sometimes you rule on standing because it's pretty obvious that this is a tricky thing. Sometimes you rule on standing because I don't really want to deal with this.
Yeah.
And the problem is, of course, making precedent. But nowadays in the courts, precedent doesn't matter, so I'm not so worried about that anymore.
Yes. Well, sometimes they can make problems disappear. And sometimes they can just make your ability to raise the issue of a problem disappear.
Right, and sometimes they just make more problems than they bargained with.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just so naked and stupid that they're doing this for partisan reasons or ideological reasons and has nothing to do with the law. That's what we see when we say that Trump can't fire anybody at the Federal Reserve because that would screw things up, but he can fire all the other heads of independent agencies because we said so, even though there's no coherent legal
why this agency
scholarly
and not that
reason
one?
why one should be different than the other.
Yeah. There is none, and I guess it all just comes down to it. They're all independent agencies. What's the difference between this one and that one? We know this one, and there's money involved. And over there, I don't know what that is.
I grew up in New York, so I totally understand the concept of, in looking at a textual reading of the law, the reason we decided this as a surprise to you is because fuck you. That's why.
Oh, well,
I totally understand that legal concept, and it's applied frequently by the Roberts Court.
Yes, I mean it is applied frequently, and they are using it. It's not generally recognized as a legal precept, but
well, they do, and they make the rules.
It works now. It's an evolution in the law.
Ask Alito; he'll tell you.
Right. Well, he might, and his wife might too.
And
she may even have
again,
it on
stepping
a flag.
back, I read some of the conservative legal experts on this who, aren't as aghast, but still scratch their head a little bit. And I'm not. This is not. You have to hand it to him because I couldn't stand him when he was alive. But
yeah,
some of the previous conservative justices were just so much more rational than the ones that we have now.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was their. That was a skill.
Scalia's writing was better. You could understand what he was doing. He'd tell you in his writing. These guys are just like what I said. That's why.
Yeah. That's what it's kind of coming down to, and we'll fix it. We'll fix it in post kind of attitude for legal reasoning. I don't know why. I just feel like this should be the answer. And that's maybe why we address it on, the emergency docket or the shadow docket, so we don't actually have to write an opinion. And then when it comes down to it, we'll just write an opinion that ignores it. The dissent will call it out, and we'll say, you had only 3 votes. It's a nice dissent. It's right.
Right.
It's correct, but it lost.
This should be mentioned because it's in the news, and I don't want to ignore it. Another rocket ship blew up.
Yes. I don't really know what to say about that. It was Elon Musk's rocket ship, so that's funny.
Well, it got further in the test than the last 2 times it blew up.
Well, okay, so that's progress.
But it still didn't get far enough so that they could actually test things. These things cost money, so,
Not me. They don't, although maybe they do. They may be taxpayer subsidized, so I guess it is costing
But
money.
Unfortunately, it had what we call in technical terms an RUD, which is a rapid unscheduled assembly. That term can also be applied to Trump's speech at West Point, but...
Yeah, well, that may have been scheduled. Possibly. Yeah. But all right. Well, I don't know why their rockets keep exploding. We kind of made it to, the moon.
Well, they should do it on July 4th. It's lovely fireworks.
Plus years ago. Yeah. I guess. Then at least everybody would understand it. And they are sprinkling pieces all over the newly minted Gulf of America, and I think that's treason. So they really need to think about what they're doing down there. No idea why all this stuff is exploding. I thought we had rockets more or less mastered, but I guess if you build them in the basement or, I don't know, have AI robots building them, I'm not sure why what the explanation is here.
Well, speaking of robots, there's a well-received video game about 2 or 3 years old called Horizons Forbidden West. And the concept here, the conceit, is that a couple of techno dudes like Elon Musk got together and decided that they were going to build AI and robots to run everything. And unfortunately, the robots were so intelligent that they, escaped control of the human builders, and they just started destroying everything. And they were self-sustaining. They could, strip the planet of the environment and use that for fuel, so there was nothing you can do to stop them. And the rich people who did this got scared, so they built a rocket ship, SpaceX, anybody, and blasted themselves to another planet until the planet was destroyed by everything. And then the robots would have no fuel, and then they could come back. And, I am reminded of this when I read any story about Elon Musk trying to escape to Mars and all the rich folks who like the big rockets that take rich people up in the air for money, and then
actually be interested.
Luckily, some of them come down, but not all of them. Not if you fly SpaceX. So it's all of a piece. The ego that's involved that says, look, we understand the entire human population can't fit on SpaceX rockets, so we'll just take the ones who can afford it. And as far as everybody else, let's just institute policy that'll get rid of them. And that's what we're doing in the United States. And everybody else should follow our lead because we lead the world, et cetera, yada, yada. And that's the entire philosophy that seems to be driving everything that they do. It's awful. It's terrible. And I offer this as some piece of condolence. This is an article in a magazine called Liberal Currents.
Oh.
You may not read. I don't read it, but I just came across it. It's called "You're Not Crazy. America Has Gone Mad." It's become so insane that being reasonable feels like a malady.
Yes.
And in the midst of the article, he just mentions this paragraph that struck me. We're throwing the most advanced health science research system into the sea. Hello, RFK Jr. and vaccines, and have turned over our public health infrastructure to quacks and crooks. We're destroying prosperity to sate the president's desire to play a 19th century political economy. We're blithely ignoring the potential for war with former allies as Trump crows about annexing Canada and Greenland. But it's them. It's not you. I just thought I would remind you.
Okay. I mean, it's worth reminding people if you haven't quite reprogrammed yourself yet, and it's only been 5 months, so maybe your internal mechanisms aren't there. Right. When the government does something, or the Department of Justice intervenes in a lawsuit, or the Department of Health and Human Services says this is or isn't recommended, or the FDA, remember that if you put a lunatic who has an upside down view of the world in charge of it, that department will later tell you, yes, this is healthy and that is unhealthy. Hey, that's the opposite of everything we understood to be the case up until now. Yeah, it's not you, it's them. They're using the trappings of government to tell you things that aren't true and that may hurt you very badly or kill you. So watch out.
So let's go from 50,000 feet to a little closer to this planet and look at a specific example of the ridiculous, and that would be Kristi Noem. This is a piece by James Fallows, Kristi Noem versus Harvard, or as they say in legal terms, Kristi Noem v. Harvard.
Right.
What their language reveals. In the life of the human spirit, words are action, a U.S. president said long ago. Let's look at words from a cabinet secretary.
Oh, no.
And take a look at what she's saying.
Oh, no. All right.
So statements or documents I'll mention in order of their appearance. May 22nd, a curt, contemptuous, sneering two-page demand letter to Harvard authorities and Kristi Noem.
Why her?
Who informed Harvard that all of their thousands of international student visas were immediately and without legislation or due process canceled, and they must within the week provide detailed dossiers on more students and staffers. Now, 2 days earlier, the same Noem had been self-humiliated before a Senate committee when Maggie Hassan asked her to explain what habeas corpus meant. And with trademark confidence and ignorance, she said, perhaps because of this experience, what did she say? Oh, she said it means that Donald Trump can do whatever she wants.
Yes, right. Whatever she wants, even. Yeah.
Whatever he wants.
What he wants, and he may want what she wants. Yeah, the total opposite. Habeas corpus is a right that the president has to deport
unwanted aliens, so he can do whatever he wants. Right?
No, not that.
So perhaps because of this experience, 2 days later, she was not in an accommodating or knowledge-respecting mode. In the letter, she informed everybody that on her whim, their privilege of enrolling students had been withdrawn.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, that was on the 22nd. The very next day, a detailed 72-page complaint filed in federal district court by the president and fellows of Harvard College against Noem, Marco Rubio as Secretary of State and other officials was filed. The Harvard filing, signed by 8 lawyers from 4 firms, is so detailed and closely reasoned, it must have been based on careful advanced planning. Given that it was just a day later. Still, it landed on a judge's desk less than 24 hours after Noem's huffy decree, followed up by a 52-page argument for a temporary restraining order, and all-nighters still have their place.
Yeah.
You remember that from college.
Yep.
Then, the next day, a terse single-page ruling from federal judge Allison Burroughs of Massachusetts grants Harvard request for a temporary restraining order until the full case could be heard. Now, the first message from Noem is a language of thuggery, extortion, ignorance, and bullying.
Yes.
The second from the lawyers is the language of people who know the laws, the limits, the norms, and the aspiration of the United States. Yes. And the third is the very terse language of the judiciary on which all too much of the country's fate now depends. So we're going to do a detailed look at each one of those things because they're important in terms of language.
All right.
Okay.
I'm ready.
As I explained to you in my April letter, said Noem, it's a privilege to enroll foreign students, and it's also a privilege to employ aliens on campus.
Is it?
Translation, how many times do I need to explain this to you, Harvard people?
Sure,
Noem, as a result of your refusal to comply with multiple requests, while perpetuating an unsafe campus environment that's hostile to Jewish students, promotes pro-Hamas sympathies, and employs racist diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've lost this privilege. Meaning, this hurts me more than it hurts you, but you've been warned, and listen, you're grounded.
And if you want to know why it's happening, blame the Jews.
Right.
Essentially.
So she says, I requested records as a courtesy that Harvard was not legally entitled to. The acting DHS general counsel responded on my behalf and afforded Harvard another opportunity to comply. Translation in English, I tried and I tried and I tried, but you people won't learn.
I guess, but you didn't try anything like
consequences must follow, she wrote, meaning,
I
don't want to pull out the belt, but you left me no choice. Aren't you ashamed? Bend over. This is language from a Secretary of Homeland Security who has absolute zero known experience in higher education of any sort, in immigration policy or enforcement, except for photo op trips to El Salvador and, the cosplay that she does.
Yeah.
And much worse than the sneering tone in Noam's letter were its demands. I can't top the chapter and verse analysis that William Finnegan offers on a Substack of the flat illegality of the total surveillance info that Noam demands within 72 hours. I highly recommend the post. As he points out, the U.S. government of our era is demanding East Germany PRC-style spying on university students as the price of continuing decades-old public programs.
Oh.
That's really the point. We'll look at the response after the break, but I think he pretty much summarizes where this administration is coming from. And again, I say to you, my friend, if you find this offensive and disturbing, you're not crazy. They are.
Well, so far, it's This is a very thorough look at this, to be sure. But yeah, at no point did we stop, but I mean, I think that the article the point of it is, this is the Secretary of Homeland Security. What is this person doing involving themselves in this education issue? Not that the education secretary is any better versed in any of this. I mean, the education secretary is absent from it because the education secretary believes that the education department should be closed.
Right.
It should have nothing to do.
As Governor J.B. Pritzker said when Noam visited his state, I don't know why she's coming, but please, Illinois citizens, make sure you know where your pets are.
Yeah, right. She could shoot them at any time. All right. How come
the
my
well actually response, which is
are.
What it's entitled. Well, actually. We'll do that after the break.
Yeah. All right. Good. We'll take a look at that. All right. All the buttons are unpressed today. Things are coming apart at the seams. All right. Well, I forget what my instructions are in all of this, but we can move things around in post, but we're going to take our break at a weird time in the music, but at the correct time in life, which is now. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show in the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Coming back at the weird wrong time in the music, but don't worry about it. And if you're listening in the podcast, hopefully you won't notice any difference. All right, Greg Dworkin, we were in the middle of a long article about mostly about how obnoxious Trump administration policy, if you can call it that, is with respect to immigration and its nexus with education, and how dumb Kristi Noem is in general, although I feel like she's not doing anything in all of this but standing around while they file paperwork in her name, but that's dumb too.
Well, Kristi Noem is the perfect example of what this article is really about. Why does public language matter?
Okay.
And before we do the lawyers and then the judge, which gets shorter and shorter, because Noam is all over the place with flowery thuggery.
That's nice.
James Fallow says, why does public language matter? Of course, he thinks so. I think he's the next speechwriter for Carter. A little wrap up on the theme. Words are not the same as action, but words matter. Remember some of these words, for example, and what they entail, and how they bring out emotion in you. Just a few. In the beginning.
Okay.
Right? Always meaningful.
Yeah, yeah.
When in the course of human events, is the familiar one to many of us.
Sure.
407 years ago.
Ah. Yeah.
That would be Lincoln, of course. And the only thing we have to fear is, that would be FDR.
Yeah.
Nearly 50 years ago, in what I consider the best speech of his presidency, of course, I'm biased, he says, the late Jimmy Carter said, "I understand fully the limits of moral suasion. We have no illusion that changes will come easily or soon." He did this at Notre Dame's commencement. "But I also believe that it's a mistake to undervalue the power of words, from common sense to I have a dream. In the life of the human spirit, words are action, much more so than many of us realize."
Okay.
So that's why you look to the words.
Sure.
So the words of the well actually response from the lawyers, Fallow says is so good, you should really read the whole 72-page filing. And I understand nobody's going to read the whole 72-page filing, but I'm just telling you should read the whole 72-page filing. Here's the link. So he says, I'll quote just two quick parts. "The government's revocation of Harvard certification for foreign students was not a product of the ordinary review process set out in detailed regulations that define the limited circumstances under which a school certification may be revoked, and put a premium on the due process rights of institutions and students. On its face, the revocation is part of the government's broader effort to retaliate against Harvard for its refusal to surrender its academic independence." That's as clear as day. Yes. Clear as crystal. That's what's going on.
Arbitrary and capricious being defined for you.
Yeah. And it also says a case involves a coordinated effort to retaliate against Harvard for its refusal to accede to government demands about what a private university can teach, whom it can admit, who it can hire, and what areas of study it can pursue. When Harvard declined, the administration unleashed the full power of the federal government, freezing billions in federal grants, proposing to eliminate Harvard's tax-exempt status, opening multiple federal investigations, and most relevant here, threatening to terminate Harvard's participation in F1 and J1 visa programs. Yesterday, the government made good on that threat, and it did so via a letter that makes plain the DHS is not even pretending to follow its own regulations, either as to process or substance. Instead, DHS all but announced that the revocation is blatantly in retaliation for Harvard's exercise of academic freedom.
Oh, no.
Now, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
You not only have no grounds to do this, it's very clear that you are being blatantly vindictive, and that's what we are going to take to the judges who have to decide this, many of whom graduated from Harvard, by the way.
Yeah.
And we'll see how they take it. And then finally, a court weighs in. I don't know where this Allison Burroughs judge went to school. I suppose I could look it up. But ruled in the university's favor just a few hours after Harvard filed the lengthy complaint that was pre-prepared, because that was done only a day after Kristi Noem's being a thug. The action part, the president and fellows of Harvard College, the plaintiff, has made a sufficient showing that unless its motion for a temporary restraining order is granted, it will sustain immediate and irreparable injury. Thus, a TRO is justified. Plaintiff's motion granted. That's it.
All right. Well, that is terse. Allison Burroughs.
Business-like, right.
Middlebury College, University of Pennsylvania Law School. Not Harvard, but don't tell them that, I guess.
Yeah, but, that's the thing.
I'm just saying, not that it doesn't measure up to Harvard.
She went to a liberal arts school, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
It's got the word liberal.
Right.
Might as well say woke or DEI.
Yeah.
Might as well say woke arts to me.
Right.
That's all I need to know to it. I mean, that's the kind of idiot level we're talking about here.
Yeah. Everybody should go to trade school. Yeah, that's the new line too, by the way. We need more plumbers and electricians, not smart people.
We need Joe the plumber, not you smart.
They understand things. What are you talking about?
Who can write 72-page briefs in 24 hours.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't noticed a shortage of plumbers or electricians, but by the way, they need to operate in a legal system so that they get paid for their work. That's part of the reason we have the rule of law, but screw all of that.
Right. So we have Will Sommer at the Bulwark kind of puts his finger on a really kind of interesting split in RFK world. In addition to MAGA Made America Great Again, then there's MAHA.
Oh, yeah.
Which always reminds me of the Three Stooges with the Maharaja bit.
Okay.
The Maharaja. So, MAHA, what do you think? Aha, I know, MAHA in disarray, leading anti-vaxxer parts ways with RFK. He's talking about Del Bigtree,
Wow.
one of the biggest jerks on the planet.
What's going on here?
Children's Health Defense, Virginia chapter.
What? Get lost.
That's the picture that leads this off. Del Bigtree greets supporters at a rally held by Children's Health Defense in Washington, D.C. And freedom of speech includes views you don't like, it says here. They should tell that to the judge who's trying to decide whether or not Harvard gets to do what they want to do for academic freedom. But there's a split in the camp of the RFK world supporters between those who hate vaccines and want to be sure that vaccines are eliminated at all costs,
great,
like Del Bigtree, and those who think that the way to public health is to eat plants and wash your hands, and that's enough to do anything you need. And because the two groups are so extreme, this may not make sense that there's a split. But the anti-vaxxers say any effort, any time spent trying to get people to eat healthier is distracting from the whole plan of being anti-vaccine, which should be 100% all of your time at all times. And the other side says the same thing, only about their issue.
Okay.
So when you get to be extremist, you can't get along with the other extremists for some reason.
It's the extremeness.
Right. The primary fault line, Will Sommer writes, in MAHA land runs between the anti-vaccine veterans and the more optics-focused influencers eager to tackle uncontroversial issues like reduce chronic illness, get dyes out of processed food. The former group thinks the influencers' food advocacy is both unlikely to succeed and trivial, compared to the real problem, injections of poison. At their most charitable, the anti-vaxxers see the food-obsessed faction as a distraction that will divert Kennedy's focus. Kennedy hasn't even been Health and Human Services Secretary for 4 months, and already the clash has become a recurring problem. There's backlash on the right towards Trump new Surgeon General pick, Casey Means, who's seen by some anti-vax activists as insufficiently opposed to vaccinations. And it's given a rise to a conspiracy that Kennedy himself is somehow being blackmailed by unnamed but pro-vaccine forces, a wild notion that even his own former presidential running mate has promoted.
Oh, good.
Now, the weird thing is that Kristi Noem knows no more about the law and how to run her department than a rock, and Kennedy doesn't know anything about his department either, even though they both have the power to screw things up in your lives. Every time Kennedy is at a hearing and they ask him about, well, what about this? He's, I don't know anything about it.
I didn't know
what about this department of yours? Well, I didn't know that. Well, how about firing all these people for like prevention of lead poisoning and other things that are like really important? Well, I didn't know we did that.
Yeah.
But now divisions in Kennedy's camp may be getting even worse. The biggest anti-vax activist in the country is quitting. And that's Del Bigtree. I have to be able to call balls and strikes, he said. I have to be able to call what I like and what I don't. Can't do that from within the administration.
Oh, he's in HHS structure? I don't know. I don't know anything about this guy.
He's behind the nonprofit that's pushing Kennedy to do stuff, and he's leaving the nonprofit, which is Kennedy-oriented.
Yes, all right.
Again, there's no distinction between government and non-government. Ask Elon Musk.
Right.
So the idea that, he was formerly in the government, I don't even know what that means anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But okay, so he was advising Kennedy on vaccine issues to the extent that Kennedy takes advice on anything.
Right.
All right. And Kennedy is such a weird case. Like the whole use case really for bringing RFK Jr. into the picture was, sure, he's crazy, but he's from the Kennedy clan. Those guys know how government works.
Right. So now the anti-vax people are saying the reason Bigtree had to resign from his advisory role is you don't ever have to define who they are. They are trying to get him to stop talking about anti-vaccine stuff.
Well, they
always
were.
We know food is an issue, one of them said, but are we focusing enough on vaccines?
I don't know. No?
So there was this whole MAHA template that came out, and it didn't focus on anti-vax stuff.
Yeah, that's their thing, and something.
It's just the beginning. I mean, none of these people are going to be able to get along with humans.
No, I guess not.
They're just so extreme.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to them that, well, okay, I understand that you hate vaccines and all that, but like, what about when you're not sick? How do you stay healthy? I don't know. Who cares? Just don't vaccinate anybody. That's it. That's the whole health program. Yeah, for me. All right. Well, then you're not the secretary. I should be. You listen to me. No, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. Well, whatever. Good. Fine. So the people who think aliens built the pyramids are fighting with the people who think there's litter boxes in schools, and great. In the meantime, no health policy for a country of 300 million. Wonderful. Excellent. And proudly idiotic and ignorant of how things work. It is kind of amazing that a Kennedy, I think that was the whole thing. Well, we use the name, we'll slip them by because they know how government works. And it's like this guy's been living on the trust fund and doing nothing for a very long time. He wants nothing to do with the government, and maybe for good reason. A whole family killed because they got involved in the government. I don't want anything to do with it. All of a sudden, actually, you're in charge of everything. Oh, crap. I don't know how stuff works.
So I got one last thing to talk about here.
All right.
Which is sort of interesting. And
good.
You remember Josie Reisman's book about Vince McMahon, how Trump sees everything through the eyes of a wrestler. It's all kayfabe, fake stuff,
okay.
heels, and there's faces. Faces are the good guys, heels are the bad guys.
Yeah, we've heard this.
Okay. So you can get the concept here. And there's a story that J.V. Last tells about a couple of wrestlers. I guess this was in the 80s.
I may know.
80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, okay.
The wrestlers of the era. Andre the Giant, Randy Savage, the
those
Iron
guys,
Sheik,
early
those
80s.
guys.
Sure.
They were performers. And then there was Hulk Hogan, who was at the time the biggest star.
Sure.
And his buddies.
All right.
And he was big enough so that he wanted to employ his buddies whether they were good or not.
Oh.
And one of the buddies that he wanted to employ was a wrestler who you may or may not remember or recall or recognize, who went by the name Honky Tonk Man. And his shtick was to dress like Elvis, even though he looked nothing like him.
Oh, I see the picture, yes.
And hit people over the head with a guitar.
That was a cartoon, El Kabong.
Yeah, exactly. With Quick Draw McGraw.
Yeah, Kabong. His alter ego.
Yes.
All right.
So that was the whole thing. And it was
guitar.
Good for 3 seconds, and after that you get bored.
Yeah.
The point is that Hogan convinced Hulk Hogan, who was a star, and the Honky Tonk Man was his friend, convinced his professional organization to promote him. And they did, and they did, and they did. And basically, he had a black hole for charisma. Nobody liked him. And it didn't work.
Okay. So like a stop trying to make Honky Tonk Man happen situation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the point of all of this is, what's this got to do with politics?
I don't know.
Politics is a combination of an outside game and an inside game.
Mm-hmm.
The inside game is making the people who are in charge or are funders or people you never heard of, management, whatever, line up behind you. And the Honky Tonk Man had Hulk Hogan and the insiders saying, okay, we're going to make you a star. But the outside game is convincing the public that this is a good idea. What Trump is good at is the inside game by threatening people or promising them
well, that's
power.
an easy thing, like where you
and
call
the outside
shots.
game is convincing the public he's not a crook. And Trump's good at both.
I see. Well, at least convincing enough of the public that he's not a crook. Sure. I mean, he's
a con man.
He's
a con man
him
for the inside game, and he's a con man for
must
the
be
outside
working.
game. He never delivers, but he's a con man for both, and he succeeds at both, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
Point being that somebody like the Honky Tonk Man might succeed at the inside game, but he'll never go anywhere because you can't win the outside game. The guy was never popular, and so he faded pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Now, there are politicians who are just like the Honky Tonk Man. And the one that comes to mind is J.D. Vance.
Okay, that's the
You think
the photo
that he
montage.
has an inside track to be the next presidential candidate. But no,
No.
because he's got all the
I was
charisma of
turned
a
around
Ted
there.
Cruz.
I got you there. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I had come at that at one point at a different angle, but yeah, okay. It makes the same argument. I think we ran into this when we said, I don't know, we're fantasizing perhaps about impeaching Trump or about whatever, or what would happen if he
Yeah, you
if he
picked J.D.
dropped
Vance
dead.
so that you wouldn't impeach him.
Right. There's that, and then when we were thinking about things like, hey, Trump could eat too many hamburgers and just, he could drop dead. He's not a healthy looking guy. And but then you're going to get JD Vance. And my response to that was always, I wouldn't love to see it, but JD Vance running someone else's cult of personality is impossible. He doesn't have any personality of his own. He can't convert it to his own cult of personality. But I mean,
Right.
The whole thing depends on just, I don't know, projecting a completely different image. He does not have that gear.
Right.
He doesn't. Can't order a donut.
He's not a con man.
No. I mean, he's trying very hard to be, and he just thinks if he mouths the words, maybe it'll work. And he must be beside himself at night thinking about how smart he thinks he is and seeing Donald Trump, who he no doubt thinks he once admitted that guy's a dummy. He doesn't know anything. He's dangerous
I'll give you another one.
I can't do this thing he's doing. That bothers
Yeah, I'll
me.
give you another example.
Yeah.
Same thing, except that there was a day that people actually worried about him, and I didn't for the same reason I'm not that worried about J.D. Vance.
All right.
Yes, J.D. Vance is evil. Yes, J.D. Vance is smarter than
sure.
most of the people.
Hey,
that work
I
in
hope
the
he
Trump
eats the same
administration.
hamburger.
However, everybody hates him.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
There's nobody
line
grabbing
about
the crotch of cardboard cutout J.D. Vance's and taking pictures the way Murdery Trader Green does.
Right. The senator from Minnesota, former senator from Minnesota, who said about Ted Cruz.
Okay.
Oh,
right.
I like Ted Cruz more than most of my colleagues, and I hate Ted Cruz.
Yeah. Right. He used to be he was the big joke in the Senate, and then I don't know. Then there was J.D. Vance, but now also Tommy Tuberville, who also may be leaving.
Right, but the ones his star has fallen so low that you don't even think of anymore in those contexts. But he is the perfect example of the same thing, and that would be one fellow named Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis had absolutely no charisma, could not speak to humans.
Right, still can't.
Even in pictures.
Right.
Where you'd see him standing next to Joe Biden. Biden would be glad-handing and smiling, and he'd be staring at his funky boots.
Yeah, Smurf boots. I remember those.
Right? And so Ted Cruz is an example. Ron DeSantis is an example. J.D. Vance is an example.
Yeah.
Phil Gramm in an earlier era, the head of the banking committee, was an example. I have all the money. I'm going to win. But you can't do that without the outside game. You can't do that without the charisma to reach people to make them vote for you.
Right.
And if you don't have that, you're not going to win. And it's got nothing to do with message. For some reason, everybody's always hung up on, well, the Democrats didn't have the right message. If they had just changed 3 words and did it in a different... No.
Yeah.
There's so many other bigger things going on here. AOC is a talent.
Yes.
And she can relate and react to people outside of her area. Yeah. And that talent is something that DeSantis, Cruz, J.D. Vance don't have. So they have a better inside game in terms of getting to the position, but no outside game.
Well, because they have
AOC has an outside game, but no inside game. That's why she's not going to be the presidential candidate.
Yeah, well, yeah. Although she's working, she actually understands the inside game better than you think.
She might get there, but she doesn't have it.
And
J.D. Vance may understand that he's not popular, but that doesn't make him able to do it. You got to have both.
Yeah, and they may both be suffering in part from the same issue. The only problem here is that the inside game actually normally takes some time to develop. J.D. Vance just hasn't spent that time. AOC has spent more time in government than J.D. Vance has. And is working to build it and understands the dynamics of it. But yeah, she's still kind of new.
Right. Ken Martin.
Oh.
Recognize the name?
I feel like I should.
He's the new Democratic National Committee chair.
Then he's got work to do.
Yeah. He was, I guess,
Ken
head of
Martin.
the Democratic Party in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, okay. I
And
remember the contest now that you're mentioning.
and there
Yes,
was a
sure.
contest
Right.
between the head of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin, Ben Wickler.
Yeah, yeah. And what
We
a
know
contest.
Ben
Minnesota
because
and
he's an
Wisconsin.
activist
Yikes.
and he won all those close Supreme Court seats in Wisconsin.
Right?
We know he's good.
Yes.
We know him.
He had an
Maybe you didn't
outside
know Ken
game.
Martin, but Ken Martin has been in the job of
Hmm.
being the head of the
Oh, no.
Minnesota DNC
Yeah.
for a long, long time, and then he was head of the committee that looks at all of this sort of stuff.
Inside.
And so he's an insider, and everybody on the Democratic National Committee knew him.
Yeah. And you know
Okay,
who votes
and
for
so
the
Ben
chair?
Wickler was interviewed in
Them.
Wisconsin over the weekend,
Okay.
and basically the question is, okay, so what happened? And he said, well, I got in the game late.
Yeah.
I did my best. But
Mhm.
Ken's been basically running for a long time.
Yeah.
And so basically what it comes down to is that people told me to my face,
Yeah.
we love Ben, but we know Ken.
Yeah.
And that's basically how he won. And that is a summary of the inside game. It's not that Ben Wickler isn't good at it, but like you said, it
Right.
takes time. And I just thought
Yeah.
that was a perfect illustration of that.
It is an excellent illustration of it, and it illustrates the Jerry Connolly over AOC election there. He's been doing the thing that we think of as necessary criteria for ascension to this job for longer than you have. And that's all. It's not that we don't like you, and not that you won't have your turn. It's
We're
just that's
comfortable
the
with
way
him.
it goes.
I just met you. I'm not
Yes.
sure about some other things in my gut. But I know Ken, and he's been in charge, and I've seen him when he has the gavel, and he wasn't a jerk, and
Yeah.
I know him.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable.
Yeah. So Yuri Andropov of the party here. Yeah. Well, we're all ready for Gorbachev, the next new thing, but we know Yuri, and of course, he didn't last very long. But so that's from the Soviet era of the same sort of thing. Like you've positioned yourself inside. No one outside knows you or likes you, but you have the trust of other insiders here in the United States, right? So recently, Jerry Connolly, AOC, other insider Democratic caucus elections, going back a little further, Jack Murtha, the former Marine who does a 180 and takes a stand against the Iraq War. Why didn't he automatically ascend to leadership in the party when he was up against Steny Hoyer for majority leader? And the answer is Steny Hoyer has been working the ropes a lot longer than Jack Murtha has. Sorry. The insider wins from the, that star turn moment. That wasn't enough to elevate him. Same thing. You got to be working the room for decades.
Bottom line is you can learn from wrestling.
Yeah, I guess so. That's an interesting thing, right? No matter how many, sometimes that's not enough, right? Even if you know the right insider to get you shoehorned into the position, if the rest of the insiders haven't lined up behind you, it's not worth much. And they start actively working to undermine you along the way too. Right. Just because Hulk Hogan.
I gotta go. Enough. Here come the lawn people.
Okay, good morning, lawn people. There need to be more of them. Less people in Harvard, apparently, and more people cutting the lawns with vocational training. Okay, very good. Thanks, Greg. That got us all the way almost through the hour, and you get another chance at it tomorrow.
We'll do it again, this time with fanfare.
Yeah, or maybe I should just record the lawnmowers and use that. All right.
Well, that'll work. Or the new appliances.
Oh, yeah, right.
What song did you program for your new appliances?
Yeah, I didn't program anything. It's silent, and I have to look through a user manual to figure out how to program some music to it. But
yeah, I think you should put in a fanfare.
Yeah, well, right. If I get a choice, I guess I should be able to do that. Yeah, but as far as positioning on the list, reading the user manual, way down there. Just wash the clothes. Although a cheerful little tune to let you know you're done.
Yeah, or a drum roll.
Yeah, right, something. Right, even if a drum roll implies that you're being executed prior to putting your clothes in the dryer. But hey. All right. Good. Thank you. We'll take it from here if you think the lawnmower guys are going to get too close. And if they do, and you have to mute and you want to send things along, that is always going to work. Oh, and the all indications are that the lawnmower guys are just getting a little too close for comfort. Okay. So let's see. Oh, that brings us almost to the top of the hour and almost time to turn the music on. I guess we will take up some of these other stories on the other side. However, I guess we have a thematic thing we should be adding. More Trump pardons are dropping. On top of the corrupt sheriff of Culpeper County, who received his pardon recently. And I guess really the Pulitzer level work that is about to be done in uncovering just what the bargain was, the corrupt bargain was, how much money was dropped. Still out there, although a more obvious examples of, you give me, is there something that you have in your hand that if it were in my hand, I would have this pardon, which is in the other hand, would be handed over to you? What might that be? $1 million. 2 recent pardons dropping of highly dubious pardons. Some more stupid than others. But we'll get to some of that afterwards. And, let's see. Oh, yes. Right. To add to the palace intrigue and the insider game, there's the weird happenings also inside of the Trump White House in terms of coming to understand what has been happening over at the Pentagon with Pete Hegseth and his, drunken administration of his own personal staff. We had those 3 high-ranking Hegseth aides not only dismissed, but escorted out of the building by security, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, but whenever you do that, kind of demands an inquiry into what the hell's going on over there. And as it turns out, the investigation into what was happening and why has now generated a couple of news stories we need to pay some attention to. It's really, there's such intrigue going on over there. And I guess if you are operating in wrestling mode and you really think that getting to the man will catapult you to a position of power, maybe. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's take a look at, let's try and find a way to make sense of the jumble I was trying to cram in before the break. 2 pardons, not entirely clear that one is finished, but is generating a lot of headline heat. And one that is done and that is also highly corrupt. The New York Times has the, I think, more extensive story here is it Ken Vogel? Oh, why is this blanking out rather than displaying this wonderful story for me? Here we go. Ken Vogel, affectionately referred to as Kenneth P. Vogel, or officially referred to that way, and affectionately referred to as Ken. Kenny Boy Vogel. I don't know him. Anyway, this is the story. The headline, Trump pardoned tax cheat. I can't believe it. After mother attended $1 million dinner. I mean, that boils it down pretty well, quite honestly. For a New York Times headline, that really says it. Paul, I'm guessing the name is Walczak, maybe? W-A-L. That's familiar enough. C-Z-A-K, Walczak is my best guess there. Paul Walczak's, no relation to Paul Waldman, who's no relation to me, his pardon application. He filled out paperwork. Trump and paperwork, man. His pardon application cited his mother's support for the president, including raising millions of dollars and a connection to a plot to publicize a Biden family diary. And you probably guess whose diary it is. There was only one, I think, at issue at the time. Anyway, this is really a mess. And, there should be a huge scandal. And quite honestly, the idea that Jake Tapper is running around saying that the Biden thing is the huge scandal you should be paying attention to. I know he has to sell books, but I mean, really. And I think he was on the air somewhere yesterday saying, I guess, in an attempt to hype the the book and the controversy on which the book is based, which isn't even a controversy and whatever. But he actually uttered the words. And there was a small qualifier to it, to be sure, if you want to be, totally fair here. But he actually invoked the phrase "worse than Watergate," which is at this point the ultimate. It's supposed to be the ultimate insult. Oh my God, this scandal's worse than Watergate. And every time we have one that's actually worse than Watergate, you say it, but now everybody laughs because, yeah, sure. All right, they're eating the cats and dogs. Sure, your scandal is worse than Watergate. Covering up, which didn't happen, or at least not very effectively. Biden's cognitive decline, which is still questionable at best, but a lot of people have reached a conclusion about it and certainly didn't feel comfortable running him as the candidate. Fine, whatever. There may even be evidence of it that stands the test of time. There may be more coming. I don't know, whatever. But worse than Watergate? Yeah, I don't think so. And really, neither does Jake Tapper. And that's why he kind of said, well, it's worse than Watergate in a way. I'm not sure what the way was, but in a way, which is Jake Tapper's way, I think, of there's something in his conscience that bothers him, saying, well, it's not really worse than Watergate. But I think his explanation was, well, worse than Watergate in this sense. Richard Nixon was apparently a drunk as well, on top of, having very, very bad and dangerous ideas about the way the government ought to work, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of rewrote the core code of the government to make sure that his stuff wouldn't happen again. But then we eliminated a lot of it and said, actually, we think it should happen for Republicans. Republicans should be able to do this. Democrats should not. And, Anyway, but he was basically saying, well, when Nixon wasn't drunk, at least he was in control of his faculties. Whereas my argument is that Joe Biden never was, no matter whether he was drinking or not. And no one was accusing him of drinking. And so therefore worse than Watergate, as opposed to, well, the substance of the issue here is if you accept at face value the charges leveled against Biden here, he was not the one calling the shots. And I guess constitutionally that would be very bad. You're supposed to be able to rely on the person having been elected calling the shots, and not unelected appointed people around him. But if the shots were broadly legal and within bounds, that's a very different thing from Nixon in control of his faculties, nonetheless saying if the Constitution means if the president does it, that means it's not illegal. That's not really being in control of your faculties, as it happens. So anyway, let's reject the idea that it's worse than Watergate and instead turn to this facial corruption. Trump pardoned tax cheat, and it doesn't really matter that it was a tax cheat that he pardoned, although that is par for the course with Trump. Though, other presidents have certainly pardoned wealthy tax cheats who have been of help to them politically, but this one a little more naked than usual. Pardoned a tax cheat after mother attended $1 million dinner, and there's lots of irony to go around here, plus other connections to other scandalous activity. As Paul Walchak awaited sentencing earlier this year, his best hope for avoiding prison time rested with the newly inaugurated president. And you can all understand why that is. And Trump's commitment to the bit of the corrupt bargain is really all the point of the whole thing here. I was going to say, even in the subheader there, that Paul Walchak's pardon application cited his mother's support for the president. Now that we are working in the context of, well, of course Donald Trump is easily manipulated and not only open to corruption, but is actively pursuing corrupt deals wherever he can find them. Yes, we all understand that, and we're very rarely shocked by it anymore, but understand that a pardon application ordinarily would go to great lengths to avoid making mention of these things. The idea of the pardon application is to put down on paper things that will make the president who pardons you look good for pardoning you. Give us a strong explanation of why your situation represents a miscarriage of justice and that the president will be a public hero for pardoning you. That's what we're looking for in this application. But of course, if you change to a pardon attorney who himself is dedicated to the art of corruption, then that, I guess, then you want to say, all right, in service to your boss, what should be on a pardon application is things that will make the boss happy that he pardoned you, i.e. money, because that's what makes Donald Trump happy. All right. So as Walchuk awaited sentencing, his best hope was that Trump was now going to become president. Mr. Walchuk, a former nursing home executive, in case you were looking for ways to make him worse, like back in the 1980s, you would say, well, he's a tax cheat, but he's also a South African drug dealer. If you're in the Lethal Weapon franchise or whatever, or maybe that was Tequila Sunrise. I don't remember which terrible Mel Gibson vehicle that was, but the bad guy was not only a drug dealer, but a South African drug dealer. So they were really on the outs, the South Africans at that point, and they're getting there again. Anyway, Mr. Walchuk, a former nursing home executive, tax cheat, rich guy, corrupt asshole, nursing home executive. I mean, that could be a good thing, like helping elderly people live comfortably, in their golden years, or somewhat less than golden years, perhaps. Certainly an admirable pursuit, but it hints that maybe he's one of those cheater guys who actually makes people miserable in exchange for stealing their money. A former nursing home executive who had pleaded guilty to tax crimes, not abuse of elders, but tax crimes. But the tax crimes were, in fact, in the end, abuse of the trust of these elders. He was pleaded guilty to tax crimes days after the 2024 election, submitted a pardon application to President Trump around Inauguration Day. So he probably never really believed he was going to be going to prison because he could pull the strings necessary to get out. My sentencing is right after the election, but I'm not sweating it because I know who won the election, Donald Trump. And by the time he's inaugurated and has a new mailing address and I can send him my pardon application, I will do it right away. The application focused not solely on Mr. Walchuk's offenses, but also on the political activity of his mother, whose name, by the way, is Elizabeth Fago, I guess, F-A-G-O. We'll go with that as the pronunciation. Again, pardon application, not really about so much why I'm in trouble with the law and why I shouldn't be, but look what my mom has done for you. That's an indication that you don't belong in the pardon pile, ordinarily. Ms. Fago had raised millions of dollars for Mr. Trump's campaigns and those of other Republicans, the application said. It also highlighted her connection to an effort to sabotage Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. Isn't that great? It's not enough that you raised millions of dollars. What have you done to hurt my enemies? You have worked on that? Okay, now we're talking. Her connection to an effort to sabotage Joe Biden's campaign by publicizing the addiction diary of his daughter, Ashley Biden. Remember that? An episode that drew law enforcement scrutiny. Interesting connection between the stories here if you're looking for a connective tissue. You will recall that the diary ends up in the hands of James O'Keefe's Project Veritas group, right? And as I recall, earlier today, which one were we reading? One of Greg's articles. Was it the Kristi Noem versus Harvard thing? There was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know, but one of the three articles that we were going over that were lengthy, and I was wondering, we weren't talking about it, but it was somehow woven in and out of the narrative that he was reading us, was mentions of James O'Keefe and the intrigues of Project Veritas and how he was eventually ousted from Veritas and he ended up, I think, involved in a lawsuit against them. And one of these crazy stories had that as a major thread woven in and out of it, and we took it out of there, or Greg kind of edited out of his retelling of the narrative because it was a weird and confusing, seemed like a distraction. But I'll just bring that back in here because there's O'Keefe in this story and O'Keefe in those stories too. All right, but we haven't gotten to that yet. So Ms. Fago had raised the millions of dollars, but also helped, importantly, sabotage Biden's 2020 campaign. Didn't work, but by publicizing this diary that Ashley Biden had left behind in an apartment that she had rented at some point and moved out of. You remember all this? You'll be reminded of it in this story, if not. Mr. Walczak's pardon application argued that his criminal prosecution, this is why it's supposedly a miscarriage of justice to have put him away, was motivated more by his mother's efforts for Trump than by his admitted use of money earmarked for employees' taxes to fund an extravagant lifestyle. So now we understand why he's a tax cheat, there's more detail to come. Still, weeks went by and no pardon was forthcoming. Like, this is the baffling part here. But we raised millions of dollars for you and we helped sabotage Biden. You've been president for like 6 weeks. How come I haven't been pardoned of the federal crimes I've been convicted of? And remember, most people go to prison and actually, in many cases for presidential pardons are in prison for decades before any president. And they petition multiple presidents. And then finally in your, old age or something, you're finally pardoned after spending 40 years in prison or 10 years in prison even. But the Trump people want their pardons before they ever set foot in prison. It's sort of like I keep comparing it back to the stand your ground laws, which, you're entitled to the defense in court of self-defense in the real world. You shot somebody because they were breaking into your home and you were frightened for your safety. And you have the right to protect your home and family. Yeah, but I have to go on trial and say those things. And couldn't we use, I want a law that makes it so that I don't even have to show up in the courtroom. Stand your ground, right? So, yeah, similar. I want my pardon before I begin serving my sentence. So, weeks went by and no pardon was forthcoming, even as Mr. Trump issued clemency grants to hundreds of other allies. Then the reason presents itself. Ms. Fago was invited, out of all the people in America, to a $1 million per person fundraising dinner last month that promised face-to-face access to Mr. Trump at his private Pervalago sex dungeon in Palm Beach, Florida. And less than 3 weeks after she attended the dinner, i.e. bought the ticket, $1 million, Mr. Trump signed a full and unconditional pardon. Dun, 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 dun. Isn't that something? It came just in the nick of time for Mr. Walczak, sparing him from having to pay nearly $4.4 million in restitution and from reporting to prison for that 18-month sentence that he had been handed down just 12 days earlier. A judge had justified the incarceration by declaring that there is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich. And the judge was right, used to be right. But now, of course, we live in an America where there is a get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich. Or you could look at it this way. No, the judge is still right. There's no get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich. There's a get-out-of-jail for $1 million card for the rich. And if you're rich enough, that's free. Or if you're using other people's money, that is perhaps free. But no, get out of jail for $1 million is the actual card. The pardon, however, indicated otherwise. The case of Ms. Fago and Mr. Walczak is the latest example of the president's willingness to use his clemency powers to reward allies who advance his political causes and to punish his enemies. Right? So the official story, in addition to the pardon, becomes, as you'll see later on in the story, well, it's not that Walczak was a tax cheat, or at the very least, everybody's a tax cheat. The president's a tax cheat. He told you he was a tax cheat in the debates in the 2016 election. That makes me smart, remember? Right. So he's a tax cheat. Therefore, everybody worthy is a tax cheat. And the reason he was being prosecuted was that his mom helped Trump in the election. could have prosecuted anybody for being a tax cheat. Remember, Trump probably thinks everyone is a tax cheat. You're a tax cheat in his mind because it's a good thing to be a tax cheat. You're not as good at it as he is, but you're trying your best. I'm sure is his view of things. And the reason he was prosecuted for it out of all the millions of tax cheats out there, was because he had helped Trump. Therefore, Biden was mad at him. And there might even be, you might even have a case that people would stroke their chins and go, at, given not only that she raised money for Trump, because millions of people did that, but she wanted to distinguish herself in all of this. And probably not even with any mind towards excusing her son from tax charges, because that hadn't happened yet. But, I want to be a superstar in the world by helping James O'Keefe get a hold illicitly of Ashley Biden's diary. I mean, she's really down the MAGA rabbit hole here. Anyway, back to the more cogent telling of this by Ken Vogel. Mr. Walczak's pardon application was described to the New York Times by a person who received it but was not authorized to share. So, a little naughty here. Ms. Fago, Mr. Walczak, and his lawyer did not respond to questions. A White House official echoed the framing in Walczak's application, asserting in a statement to the Times that he was, quote, targeted by the Biden administration over his family's conservative politics. All right, so what did he allegedly do here? Or rather, what did he do? He was convicted of this. And in fact, even I think may have pled to some of this stuff. The next section title describes some of it. A $2 million yacht, among other things. Mr. Walczak, 55, joined his mother's nursing home business after dropping out of college, eventually becoming chief executive. So usually, those are for jobs for dropouts. After she sold the company in 2007, they invested $18 million in a new nursing home venture based in South Florida. It's got to be lucrative, right? Where they lived a luxurious lifestyle. Not the patients or residents, but them. By 2011, prosecutors said, Mr. Walczak had stopped paying employment taxes. Friggin' Obama, or whatever. I don't know what his excuse was. But between 2016 and 2019, they said, he withheld more than $10 million from the paychecks of the nurses, doctors, and others who worked at his facilities under the pretext of using it for their Social Security, Medicare, and federal income taxes. When you fill out the forms and you work someplace, put down how much money should be withheld for, to cover your taxes so that your tax bill isn't high at the end of the year, or you might even get a refund at the end of the year when you reconcile all of that. Well, that money that's withheld is supposed to go to the federal government so that, they can buy things and run efficiently and the rest of our taxes don't go up. But this guy said, actually, I should keep that money. And instead, he used the money to buy a $2 million yacht and pay for travel and purchases at high-end retailers, including Bergdorf Goodman and Cartier, prosecutors said. He was charged in February of 2023 with 13 counts of tax crimes. And remember, he's been stealing this money since 2011. So, by the time he pleaded guilty to 2 of the counts and agreed to pay the restitution on November 15th, 2024, Mr. Trump had been elected for a second term to the White House. The family had reason to believe, I wonder why, that the incoming president might look fondly on a pardon application. Ms. Fago, 74, had helped host at least 3 fundraisers for Mr. Trump's campaigns. Okay. She and her son, other one, Joey Fago, who is Mr. Walczak's half-brother, and his wife, Joey's wife, attended VIP events at Trump's 2017 and 2025 inaugurations, according to social media posts, including one in which she was shown posing with Mr. Trump. Next section here, back to the other crime, an unbelievable diary. This is really interesting. During Mr. Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, Ms. Fago tried to help the candidate in other ways. To put it mildly, Ashley Biden had left her diary and other belongings in a house where she had been staying in Delray Beach, Florida, when she moved to Philadelphia during the campaign. telling a friend that she planned to return to retrieve the belongings later. Maybe unwise, but okay. A woman who moved in, Amy Harris, discovered the diary and enlisted Robert Kurlander, a longtime friend and former housemate, to help sell it because of how moral they are. Mr. Kurlander contacted Ms. Fago. Why? Not sure what the connection is there. We'll see whether there's any more information about that. When she was first told of the diary, she said she thought it would help Mr. Trump's chances of winning the election. Not that it's immoral or thievery to take this thing or whatever. Rather, that it might help Trump win the election, according to people familiar with the situation who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe the matter. And again, more commentary on Trump and MAGA forces, right? Ordinarily, like most people would say, I don't see how it helps our guy win the election to steal his opponent's daughter's diary and sell it. That seems like the sort of thing that people would say, no, that's a bad person to make president. But this is Trump, so it works. Mr. Kurlander and Ms. Harris, Amy Harris, brought Ms. Biden's diary to a September 2020 fundraiser at Ms. Fago's home in the exclusive Admiral's Cove community of Jupiter, Florida. The featured guests were Mr. Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., and the younger Mr. Trump's girlfriend at the time, even though she was older than him by a lot, Kimberly Guilfoyle. At the fundraiser, the diary was shown to Caroline Wren, the campaign finance consultant who helped organize the event. And she says this, so I go back there and I start reading through it, and there was just unbelievable stuff, Ms. Wren recalled last year on a podcast. I contacted the campaign attorneys, and then that campaign attorney said, be very careful. Don't take possession of this. Obviously, now you're really dealing with something maybe you don't want to touch, right? This could be problematic. Don't take possession of it. They wrote up a whole memo, and then they contacted the FBI and said, you need to come pick this up immediately. I guess that was supposedly the lesson of the 2016 campaign. You talk to the Russians, you really should be reporting this to the FBI. This wasn't Russians, but also, illicit behavior. Remember, that got us in trouble. Let's not do this again. The FBI did not retrieve the diary. Instead, Mr. Kurlander and Ms. Harris negotiated to provide it to Project Veritas, a Trump-allied undercover media group, you know who they are, that had been tipped to the diary's existence by Stephanie Walchak, Ms. Fago's daughter, and presumably, what's his name? What is Walchak's first name? Paul Walchak's sister, I would guess. So there's Joey, his half-brother, there's Stephanie, his sister, and Paul. Okay. So now moving on, the Justice Department during Mr. Trump's first term opened an investigation into the matter after a representative of the Biden family reported to federal authorities before the 2020 election that several of Ms. Biden's personal items had been stolen in a burglary. Ms. Fago and other family members spent election night 2020 at a White House watch party. After Trump lost, they were invited back the next month to attend a White House Christmas party, I'm sure creepily decorated by Melania, who is actually younger than Kimberly Guilfoyle. Anyway, during his final weeks in office, Ms. Fago was among a slew of loyalists tapped by Mr. Trump for appointment to government boards and commissions. And I think we all remember that. Now, just for an extra twist of irony, I got to emphasize this part here, right? So during his final weeks in office, Fago was among a slew of loyalists tapped by Trump for appointment to government boards and commissions. She resisted an effort by the Biden administration, who surely knew of her role in the diary thing by then, to rescind her appointment to the National Cancer Advisory Board, according to her son's pardon application. This is amazing that you would include this in the pardon application. But even more amazing, side story, not at all examined by Ken Vogel here, but to me the most amazing thing about this story, She gets put on the National Cancer Advisory Board by Trump. Biden says, I want to remove her from the board. She says, no, Biden does not have the right to remove me from this board, this independent board. No, that would be illegal and unconstitutional, and we can't have that happen. And oh my God, irony just hung itself in its cell. Are you kidding? And she won, too, I guess, by the way. She must have remained on the board, but that is astonishing. And now, of course, right, between the Dodgy boys and Trump and Stephen Miller and everybody else, and I guess probably Ms. Fago as well, they cheer wildly as Donald Trump dismisses people left and right from independent commissions, boards, etc., etc. Oh, yeah, you have the right to do this. He didn't, but you do. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let me see, by the way, I was just scrolling around at the various articles that Greg had left behind, and I'm starting to think that maybe since it was the Bulwark, the one we were reading was the MAHA in disarray, leading anti-vaxxer parts ways with RFK, Will Sommer's piece. And I'm wondering whether this is one of those pages where all of the guys' latest writings are on a single page, and as you scroll down, you go from one piece to another, and it doesn't necessarily differentiate. No, it kind of looks like there must have been because there was a subheader to the piece here that we didn't get to this part of the article. James O'Keefe's very sad video. And I knew I had seen James O'Keefe's name pop up at some point. So maybe if I get a chance, we'll jump back over to that piece and see what the transition is there and why James O'Keefe is included in that story. But just remember that he is involved in this story, the pardon story, one of two very egregious pardons of the day that we could be talking about. But this one just has too much going on in this one. This one is insane. And that there's also a claim in the pardon application, like one of the reasons you should pardon me is that my mom, not only was I unfairly targeted, but my mom has given you millions of dollars and then attended $1 million per person fundraiser after the election as well. And on top of that, though, she's also the one who was trying very hard to steal Ashley Biden's diary and get it published in the newspaper. And because of that, one, you appreciated my mom and tried to put her on the National Cancer Advisory Board. And two, Biden tried to rescind her nomination to that board and fought tooth and nail and managed, I guess it looks like, to prevail at the time. Because, of course, new presidents don't have the power to rescind the previous president's appointments to these independent boards and commissions. Unless, of course, the shoe is on the other foot, in which case they absolutely do. It didn't take long to reverse that. That's the biggest part of it to me. I mean, it's not really the biggest part. Just that's the biggest discovery that's buried in all of this. So anyway, the scrutiny of the diary matter continued when Mr. Biden took office. But remember that this was an investigation launched by the Trump DOJ back when they actually kind of sort of had a DOJ. In November of 2021, investigators obtained a search warrant related to a Project Veritas official that sought information about potential co-conspirators, including communications with Ms. Fago, Ms. Walchak, Stephanie, Mr. Kurlander, Ms. Harris, and others about obtaining, transporting, transferring, disseminating, or otherwise disposing of Ashley Biden's stolen property. So again, just to put a finer point on it, remember that the pardon application, which is supposed to be about all the good reasons why you'd be a public hero for freeing this person from prison. The list is, we've given you money, we tried to help your campaign either blackmail or publish dirt about your opponent's daughter, and I come from a long line, or rather a family full of people who have in fact been doing this all along. My mom is giving you money and attempting to sabotage the Trump campaign. My brother, half-brother, is giving you money and is trying to sabotage the Biden campaign. My sister has given you money and tried to sabotage the Biden campaign. For all the foregoing reasons, there should be no system of criminal justice that can hold me accountable. Let me out. And it worked. Mr. Kurlander and Ms. Harris would later plead guilty, by the way, admitting to conspiring to steal, transport, and sell the diary to Project Veritas. Ms. Harris was sentenced to 1 month in prison. Mr. Kurlander is scheduled to be sentenced next month. We'll see whether that happens. But he hasn't been giving lots of money to Trump, so I don't know. Next up, the section entitled A New Hope. It's not meant to be, I don't think, purposely evocative of the Star Wars franchise. When Mr. Trump won the presidency for a second time, it offered hope to Project Veritas. How'd that go? Ms. Fago and Mr. Walchak. In January, with Mr. Trump preparing to move back into the White House, that dump, Ms. Fago and her family traveled to Washington for the inauguration. They got VIP access to the Trump victory rally at the Capital One Arena in Washington, which I suspect is just, you give a bunch of money, you go to a place, Donald Trump doesn't pay any attention to you. He may not even show up. Middling VIP access. In the meantime, a pardon application was submitted on Mr. Walchak's behalf. It suggested that Donald Trump Jr., I must have skipped a little part here. On February 5th, rather, so right after they went to the inauguration, and it says Ms. Fago and her family. I don't know whether that includes Walchak. Like, just imagining awaiting sentencing, but being in the VIP area of the inaugural ball, or one of them anyway. It is very amazing. On February 5th, Trump's Justice Department said it was closing the investigation into the diary, and I don't think we ever really read about that, and that was just we were distracted by all the other things that were, I guess, all those things that we said. Don't tell me it's a distraction. Well, it worked in this case. Closing the investigation into the diary. But, it might not be necessary to get to the bottom of this anymore. But I guess this is the reason why you continue with those things, is you end up discovering things about actors involved in the plot, or actors or the people who were acting. Right, yeah, at the time. Brilliant, thank you. But, they end up either in positions in the administration and you wish you knew this about them ahead of time, or whatever. In this case, they get involved in pay-for-play pardon schemes. On February 5th, the DOJ closes the investigation. Ms. Fago and Ms. Walchak, Stephanie, were not charged, nor was anyone from Project Veritas, as it happens. In the meantime, a pardon application was submitted on Mr. Walchak's behalf. It suggested that Donald Trump Jr., as well as Ms. Guilfoyle and other Trump allies, supported his clemency. So Ms. Guilfoyle chimes in all the way from Greece. They all agreed, according to the application, that the only reason Mr. Wolchak was prosecuted criminally at all, not that he had stolen money, but rather that he was the son of a prominent Trump supporter. Sure. Ms. Guilfoyle declined to comment, oddly enough. Mr. Trump did not respond to a request for comment. I think they mean the younger. The application cited Mr. Biden's justification for issuing this, and here's more irony. So Wolchak's application for a pardon cites Biden's justification for his pardon to Hunter for tax crimes. He gets a pardon for tax crimes. How come I don't? So they cite Biden's sweeping pardon to his son Hunter for tax and gun crimes in December. The elder Mr. Biden had claimed in a statement that Hunter was singled out only because he is my son. So that must work for me too, right? Well, there is a quantum difference between being the son of the president of the United States and being the son of one of many, 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 many $1 million plus fundraisers, donors, whatever, to MAGA world. Even though, add in the diary, that's a big deal, but it's not the same thing. Well, they're targeting me because I'm the son of Joe Biden himself, versus they're targeting me because I'm the son of Elizabeth Fago. Who now? All right. As Ms. Fago and Mr. Wolchak awaited word on the pardon, she was invited to the Pervalago fundraiser with Mr. Trump. Why her? Because she needed a pardon, and it was an easy mark to get $1 million out of her. An invitation billed it as an intimate candlelight dinner with very limited space available to people who paid $1 million each. So you knew there was some corruption going on there, and here's a specific story about it. It was sponsored by MAGA Incorporated, a political action committee that can accept unlimited donations to support candidates and causes backed by Mr. Trump. The ask was for far more than her previous largest federal donation on record, which was still pretty big. But it's 10 times more. She once gave $100,000 to the Republican National Committee back in 2002, and it dwarfed the more than $12,000 she had directly donated to Trump's presidential campaign committees. It's 100 times more than that, right? So what's going on here? Two people briefed on the candlelight dinner said that Ms. Fago attended. It is not clear whether she donated to MAGA Incorporated or how much, but why else would they let her in? Why is it not clear? It's not clear because the campaign finance reports that would have covered that period, I guess, have not been finalized and submitted yet. Representatives from MAGA Incorporated did not respond to questions. The group has until the end of July to disclose the identities of donors from the first half of this year, which will most likely include those who paid to attend the dinner, and then you'll know. In a brief interview, Joey Fago downplayed the significance of his mother's connection to the diary saga. There was like hundreds of pardons, he said. I'm sure there's plenty of other people you can write about. Yeah, but we want to write about this one. The White House official cited the Biden administration's effort to oust Ms. Fago from the cancer board as evidence of the political motivations that contributed to Trump's decision to issue the pardon. In other words, acknowledgement from the Trump White House that the decision to oust people from boards and panels and commissions and independent agencies is in fact politically motivated. He just thinks that's a good thing if he's doing it. After Mr. Wolchak was pardoned in the tax case, he celebrated with his mother and family while wearing a red Trump-style hat reading, "Make Paul Great Again." That's going to make him mad. According to a social media post capturing the celebration. In the post, Joey Fago wrote, "What God has ahead of you, for some reason, is greater than what is behind you," along with the hashtag MAGA. What a lovely story. And it's not even the most talked about pardon of the day, I don't think, which might be this one. I'll borrow from Steve Bannon's coverage of it over at MSNBC at the Rachel Maddow blog. Trump to reward celebrity tax cheats with a pardon, adding to scandalous list. This was just a nobody, run-of-the-mill dope tax cheat, who, because of their tax cheating, had $1 million on hand to bribe us. The president's list of controversial pardons was scandalous long before this week, but his abuse has reached a new level over the past few days. Maybe this even ropes in the Walchak pardon, because I also see that the video that accompanies the piece includes the pardon for the Culpeper sheriff. Donald Trump's list of controversial pardons was scandalous long before this week, but the president's abuse has reached a new level over the last few days. On Monday afternoon, for example, Trump pardoned former Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins, despite a jury verdict that the Virginia Republican accepted over $75,000 in bribes in exchange for deputy badges for wealthy local businessmen who would use their status to get out of traffic tickets or carry concealed firearms. The president claimed Jenkins was the victim of some kind of ill-defined partisan conspiracy, despite the fact that jurors heard testimony from, among others, FBI agents, undercover FBI agents, who gave Jenkins envelopes filled with cash. That'll pretty much do it. And boy, oh boy, does Donald Trump hate citizen juries making decisions about people's guilt or innocence, because they did that to him. So they're obviously corrupt. A day later, the New York Times reported fresh details surrounding Trump's recent pardon of Florida healthcare executive Paul Walchak, we just read them, whose clemency was already controversial, with the newspaper noting that the president unexpectedly intervened in Walchak's case soon after his mom attended a $1 million per person fundraising dinner at Perva-Lago. Hours after the Times published its striking report, the list managed to get even worse. NBC News reported President Donald Trump called two of the children of imprisoned reality television couple Todd and Julie Chrisley. Is that who they are? I mean, I think I've seen them mentioned before and thought, thank God I never saw that show, but okay. But he called two of the children of the reality TV couple from the Oval Office on Tuesday, informing them of his plans to pardon their parents as soon as Wednesday. That's today. The pair, known for their roles on the TV show Chrisley Knows Best, and take that with a grain of salt when you say known for their roles. I mean, if they're known for anything, I guess it would be for that. But I never heard of that thing. But anyway, they sought pardons from Trump in February after they were convicted of bilking banks out of tens of millions of dollars in 2022, NBC News reported. And as you know, Donald Trump does not consider it a crime to bilk banks out of tens of millions of dollars if he likes you. If he does not like you, that's a horrible crime. By all accounts, the evidence assembled by prosecutors was quite strong, and a jury in Georgia found the television personalities guilty of fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to defraud the United States, which is a big deal in the United States. But of course, he too, Donald Trump, was at one point facing charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States. So, that's a good way to get out of jail. That all following a weeks-long federal trial. It's worth emphasizing that Trump's pardon for the Chrisleys isn't yet official. Might be by now, but at the time that he wrote this, it wasn't. Though NBC News confirmed that action from the White House is imminent. If recent history is any guide, the president will justify his intervention in their cases by alleging that the celebrity tax cheats were targeted because they're conservatives. In reality, there's still no evidence of the Biden-era Justice Department prosecuting anyone as part of a partisan or ideological agenda. And making matters worse, the Chrisleys were first indicted when federal prosecutors brought evidence to a grand jury in 2019, during the first term of the Trump administration. But as the political world pauses to wonder who might be next on the president's get-out-of-jail-free list, and it's not free, stop saying that, it's hard not to marvel at the sheer brazenness of Trump's gambit. In his first term, the president effectively wielded his pardon power as a corrupt weapon, rewarding loyalists, completing cover-ups, undermining federal law enforcement, and doling out favors to the politically connected. But much of these actions transpired after his 2020 election defeat, when it seemed as if his political career was over and he no longer had to concern himself with consequences. But as his second term gets underway, it appears Trump is no longer concerned about appearances or the pretense of propriety. He's corrupting the pardon process. He knows he's corrupting the pardon process. He knows that we know he's corrupting the pardon process, and he's doing it anyway. The president seems eager to act with impunity, confident in the knowledge that a Republican-led Congress will shrug its shoulders with indifference. Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices have already said that Trump's office effectively puts him above the law. Evidence of corruption doesn't seem to have an appreciable impact on his approval rating, and news organizations have to divide their coverage between this and a wide variety of other presidential abuses. The result is a dynamic in which Trump is effectively declaring, I'm handing out pardons like party favors to my political allies because they're my political allies, and there's nothing you can do about it. Traditionally, presidents have issued pardons to right a wrong or to protect those who have been falsely accused of wrongdoing. And in fact, there's a long discussion of the reason for the pardon power in the Federalist Papers, but screw that. The founders are idiots. In 2025, if Trump sees a convicted criminal as an ally, that's apparently all the president needs to know. For all the GOP hysterics during the Biden era about a two-tiered system of justice, it seems the White House has gone out of its way to create the very dynamic Republicans claimed to be against. And that's because every Republican accusation is a confession once again. There you go. And they did a very good job accusing the Biden administration of these things, knowing that if they got a hold of that power, they intended to do that and worse. But they'd still be able to point to say he did it in terrible fashion, even though he didn't do it in any fashion. Okay. All right. Let's see. Other things to catch up on. There's a lot. And not enough time, I think, to go over all of what's happening in Pete Hegseth's world. But perhaps we can spend some time on that tomorrow or Friday. Let me hand you this instead. This seems like an important thing. Something that Greg might be interested in, too. Remember that he brought up the other day, he found himself fascinated by Republican use of the Congressional Review Act and the way they were using it to bypass a filibuster possibility and to reject the ruling of the parliamentarian that California's waiver under environmental regulations, their waiver that allowed them to have higher emissions standards for cars in their state, was in fact a rule. It is not, and there's no precedent for treating it as a rule either. But because if it is deemed to be a rule, they can use the Congressional Review Act to get rid of it. They simply said, all right, we're going to consider it a rule. And when the parliamentarian said, no, it's not one, they said, ignore the parliamentarian. Let's just go ahead and repeal this thing. Well, this opens up a new world of opportunities if they're willing to use it for Democrats. Ordinarily, Democrats have kind of shied away from the use of the Congressional Review Act because it has generally been the case, Democratic or Republican, the federal bureaucracy's rulemaking power was wielded in more or less nonpartisan fashion by a nonpartisan, merit-based bureaucracy that simply implemented rules, as directed by Congress. And so, Democrats in Congress were not particularly interested in using the process to undo them. However, now that it is the Trump administration supposedly using the legalistic language, as we discussed yesterday, of rulemaking to wield the power of the federal government to do the things that they want done, even though there's no scientific basis for them, and the decision, therefore, to implement them will, in fact, by definition, be arbitrary and capricious, and therefore violative of the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, they're going to be issuing all sorts of things disguised as rules that can be ordinarily considered to be rules, even though, now that the rules about what is a rule have been broken in the Senate, maybe this isn't as powerful a tool. But David Dayen points out that maybe Democrats might become interested in the use of the Congressional Review Act in new ways. Senate Democrats have been handed a tool, he says, to stop the big, beautiful bill. How so? Thanks to a Republican vote to stop California from setting its own auto emissions, Democrats can challenge virtually any Trump administration action and eat up time on the Senate floor. Can they do it? Can they be thwarted in it? Well, anybody can be thwarted in anything if you don't care what the rules are. But let's take a look. It's refreshing in a way that we no longer have to spend much time thinking about the Senate parliamentarian, that shadowy figure whose rulings supposedly decide what the chamber can and cannot do. And again, it's a good thing we've put in our time on the Senate parliamentarian and what the role actually is and what the nuclear option can and can't do, and reminding people along the way that it's Democrats who are restrained by convention, Republicans who are not. And what if we weren't, or what if they were? We can speculate on all those things, but been a lot of background that leading to this moment, up to and including Greg's questions about the CRA just the other day. Anyway, Republicans put that, the listening to the parliamentarian, that is, to bed last week by overruling the parliamentarian over whether a Congressional Review Act resolution could nullify the EPA's waiver, not rule, but waiver, allowing California to set up its own air pollution standards on vehicles. California was given authority in a carve-out to the Clean Air Act in 1970. All the way back then, to set higher emission standards than the national rules, with the EPA subsequently granting waivers more than 100 times. The state was prepared to use its latest waiver to effectively ban gas-powered auto sales by 2035. You'd think Tesla would be in favor of that. But the Senate voted 51-44 last week to cancel that waiver, as well as two other waivers to tighten emissions rules on diesel trucks and allow zero-emission trucks on the road. The House had already voted for the resolution, so it can now be signed by President Trump. Only executive branch agency rules can be overturned by a CRA resolution, and only within 60 legislative days after being presented to Congress, in an up or down vote that avoids the Senate filibuster. The Senate parliamentarian, joining the auditors at the GAO, Government Accountability Office, said that the EPA waivers were not rules as defined by the CRA and therefore couldn't be put into a resolution. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, in a communication he sent last Congress about these very EPA waivers, agreed that the federal preemption waivers cannot be reviewed under the Congressional Review Act. But I guess he changed his mind. California has already announced that it will sue to maintain its waiver, charging that the Senate has no authority to overturn it. But the Senate operates largely on precedent, and now that the parliamentarian has been disregarded on this point, virtually any action the executive branch takes could be construed as a rule, and therefore subject to fast-track congressional review. That is, of course, unless you have a majority that is willing to say, it works for us, but not for you. And we do have that. So keep that in mind. But if everything was fair and this precedent was now applicable to every similar situation, well, then you'd have something very different. And it would be this. For this reason, Democrats could subject the Senate to time-consuming resolution votes repeatedly to such a degree that the Senate would not have time to do anything else for the rest of this session of Congress. In other words, Democrats could respond to the waiver vote by paralyzing the Senate and stopping the giant Trump tax bill from ever reaching the floor. And that's maybe a possibility even if you just lose on all these votes. You still have to have them and lose. So there really is something here. Would they use it? No. But could they? Yes. That's the point. Georgia State University assistant professor and former House Oversight Committee staffer Todd Phillips laid this out in a Prospect piece earlier this month, the American Prospect, that is. Any 30 senators, we should read this at some point, can force a CRA resolution onto the floor with a required 10 hours of debate time. But that's just like a law, man. So, that might not help. These resolutions would need the president's signature, and nearly all of them wouldn't even get to the Republican votes necessary to pass the Senate. But according to Senate procedure, they have to be dealt with if enough senators force them onto the floor. And we can muster 30, right? They must be debated and voted upon ahead of other Senate business if brought up for consideration. This means that the Democrats can tie up the Senate floor for upwards of 10 hours with any single CRA resolution, or at least for about an hour as you debate the Republican motion to table your thing or to just define it as something other than what it actually is, even according to their own precedent. The deregulatory Trump administration isn't writing a whole lot of rules limiting the raw material for these kinds of votes, but the Republican vote on EPA waivers just widely expanded the options for a CRA resolution. If the Department of Health and Human Services, say, grants a state waiver for changes to its Medicaid program, or if the U.S. Department of Agriculture does the same for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, of course, Democrats could write resolutions to overturn such waivers. If the FCC issues a broadcast license, or the Justice Department approves a merger, or the SEC decides to defer a prosecution in an investor protection case, the Senate Democrats, I'm way late here, could challenge it. If the Department of Defense inks a contract for a new weapons system or any other item of procurement, they could challenge that too. Any decision to redirect funds, change the terms of grants, or make practically any decision at all could, under the theory just enshrined into the Senate rulebook by Republicans, lead to a CRA resolution and 10 hours of debate. It could. Of course, they could just rule that it doesn't, but it should. Democrats could also go back in time to invalidate prior agency actions. The structure of the CRA is that the 60-day legislative clock for disapproving a rule starts only when it is submitted to Congress. The waivers, because they're not rules, typically haven't been submitted under CRA procedures because they're not rules. That is why the EPA waivers were available for a vote despite the 60-day legislative clock having expired on May 8th. I wondered about that. So there are all kinds of other waivers and agency decisions that never get sent to Congress and therefore could be put up for CRA resolutions. The bottom line is this. If you found something like 1,000 current or former agency actions, a reasonable number considering all the work that executive agency branches do, you would probably have enough to keep the Senate debating and voting on CRA resolutions throughout the duration of this Congress.
NetworksRadio.com.
It could be.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
But of course, you'd have to find the will to do that. And we have only this at the moment, the will to head on into the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. What's on top of the list? The anti-voting section of the Trump Department of Justice has filed an anti-voter lawsuit in North Carolina, and wait until you hear what it's about. Wish we had had time for that one.